Alright, welcome back. Today in Chapter 5 we're going to cover story and character development, creating the narrative. So what we want to do in this chapter is how do the story elements of the game differ from those of film and other entertainment media. I mean, gaming is a different media than anything else, and you have to try and figure out how are you going to keep the player engaged. Like if you had a movie and you needed to try and keep your audience engaged for 2 hours or an hour and a half, then if they're not, then they're going to just walk out and they're not going to rate your movie very high. So first thing is that we want to see how those elements differ, and then what are some traditional story structures and character archetypes. Which types of characters do we have? What is interactivity and how can it be applied to storytelling? Interactivity being how are you going to interact with the game, and how is that going to be part of storytelling? You're telling a small story in your game, and so now you want to add interactivity to that. And then what are some of the dramatic storytelling devices used in games? So how are you going to be able to do storytelling in your game, and how do these affect immersion? Immersion being bringing the person into the game. That's one of the ways that you can keep someone engaged, is that you immerse them in the game. They actually feel like they're in that world or part of that world, even though it's not, it's a virtual world, even though that they're not really there. You want them to feel like they're part of that game and in there. And then what are the different forms of character development, and how do they specifically apply to game characters? So how are you going to develop your characters, and what's going to make them unique and your game? So storytelling goes way back. And here's our example. The book talks about cave paintings, which were kind of the first visual basis for storytelling, trying to tell a story about maybe doing a drive of animals or hunting the animals to get them in for food. And then this has actually helped evolve into what we use today for storytelling. What are the types of things we use today? Film, movies. Those are probably the most dominant and most popular way of telling stories now. Television, TV series. You get involved in a series that has a continuous story or a different story each week. Those are two different types of storytelling. Interactive entertainment, i.e. Any kind of way that you can get someone to interact with that comedian on stage, is working with the audience to make his act a little more entertaining and interactive. Games revolutionize the way that stories are told. So here we're using games to bring forth interaction and bringing somebody into the story. And so this is how it basically, how the publisher saying it all started, using cave drawings, things like that. Alright, so now we're going to look at generalizing ideas. Ideas not only come from what we know, but they come from our imagination. You can start with what you know. So, I mean, what do you know about? You know about programming, you know about games that you've played, you know about stories that you've read, people you know, places you've been. Those are things that you know. So you start with those. And then a lot of the ideas from that may come from random thoughts you have throughout the day. I am guilty of that probably more than others with random. You may think they're stupid thoughts, and I say they're random stupid thoughts to myself, but they are random thoughts just kind of pop in your head from observing other people and other things, places. Looking out my window here in my office, there's trees and fountains and birds, and it's like, well, how can I put that into a story, or take that even further and put that into a game? Dreams we have when we're sleeping, some wild dreams that you could have could be a great game someday. Personal experiences, interacting with other people, interacting with the guy at the gas station or the lady at the grocery store or whatever. So those interactions with people are personal experience. One thing to be a good game maker is to take a small notebook with you. When you have one of these out of left field ideas, write this stuff down. This is a way to help revive your memory. Go, oh yeah, I thought about this, and this was a great idea. So start writing it down. Do you know anyone in the world that you thought would be a great character? Someone you met, someone you saw online, be a great character for a game. So like I said, start carrying that notepad around and writing these ideas. And it says the hardest part in making these ideas into a good game is the storyline. How are you going to get them into your storyline, these ideas, where they could be developed into a good game? Okay, so for the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about character archetypes. You know, heroes and shadows and mentors and things like that. So let's start off with the hero. On this slide, I'm talking about a hero, central character in a single-player game. You are the hero if you are the central character. Game player has to be the hero as their avatar. So your avatar, or your character represented on the screen, is your hero, and that's the archetype that you're going to have. Must bond and identify with the hero. You can't have a hero that the player does not bond with. Now, why is that? Well, because they're not going to be immersed into the game. They're not going to be drawn in. If they don't like the things that the hero does, or don't agree with the way the hero acts, then they're not going to be emotionally or physically bonded to that hero. Hero most often is the start of the story and undergoes an adventure. So the hero is going to go through an adventure in the game, and that's where you want to have your storyline. Your storyline is going to be that adventure. Where are they going to? Why are they, going on this quest? Hero assumes most of the risk and most of the action. Why is that? Why do they assume most of the action? Well, if not, you're standing around watching somebody else have all the fun or having the action, then you're not engaging the person. And that's, I can't stress this enough, that engagement is very strongly needed in your games. It's part of the basis for all games, is to get the person engaged. An example in the book they talk about is Luke Skywalker, as far as a hero that you want to have engaging and become physically and emotionally involved with. Alright, next archetype up is the shadow. Shadow, some people may call it a villain, but the shadow is a very important character, and he's kind of the opposite to the hero. He's like the anti-hero. He's responsible for all the hero's problems. So maybe the hero is going to try and capture your shadow, or as the shadow has done something to offend the hero or threaten the hero. So this is kind of that's why this makes it very important, because without this motivation of needing to go and get the shadow or the villain, whatever you want to use, then there's no real desire to play the game and to win. One thing that's unique about a shadow is that the shadow in some games may actually be the hero, and that is represented by the dark side of the hero. So your shadow may not actually be another character in the game, but it may be the dark side of your hero. So think of it that way. So when you're creating a game and you have to go and go after the villain, shadow, whatever, think of it and say, wow, can this be like the alter ego or the other side of my hero, and would that make that more interesting a story? Next archetype up is the mentor. They're real-life mentors, and there's mentors in the games. They're the ones that help guide a person. That's what a mentor does. It helps guide you through life or job or whatever. Here, where the mentor is going to be helping guiding the person through the game and towards some of the action in the game. So if you're just meandering along and you don't know where the action is, the mentor can help guide you to that, in turn helping you gain more points if you're doing points in your game, or helping you defeat the shadow or anything like that. So the mentor is important in that it's kind of a in-progress help for the person to keep them engaged in the game and keep them on the right path to winning the game. Provides information to the hero. Maybe they tell them where pieces of gold are buried, or where weapons are available, or how to use a particular weapon, or how to kill a certain villain or opponent, and then helping them gain that skill or those weapons. Most often older advisor type, like here's the Harry Potter, the older wizard there on the left, helped Harry Potter through his game. Can offer hints to the player as the direction to play, sometimes down the wrong path. Sometimes down the wrong path? What the heck do I mean by that? Sometimes the mentor takes you down the wrong path for a more challenge, to get you more action, to get you away from the easy path and say, yeah, I won the game, but you didn't score as many points as you could have, so maybe the mentor is going to take you down the wrong path to give you the ability to better yourself in your game. All right, and here we talk about the ally as an archetype. Allies are helpers to the hero. They're kind of like their sidekick. They help them complete tasks. Sometimes a hero is confronted with a task that they cannot complete by themselves. Allies are there to help them complete those tasks. So are you building in an ally to be able to help get the hero through the more difficult parts of the game? So allies are pretty important in certain situations. Another archetype is the guardian. Guardians protecting the end goal, the ones that are blocking the progress of the hero, keeping in their way. Maybe they want to test the hero to make sure that they're worthy of what they're trying to get. So until the hero has proven themselves, the guardian may block the hero's progress, maybe at a gate or an entrance or something like that. So as I said, they're going to test that hero's worthiness, and maybe the ally, if there's an ally with them. The amazing thing about guardians, just like the shadows, is they may be real in the game, or they may be imaginary. Maybe the hero is carrying some luggage with them in the back of their mind that they can't do a certain thing, and then the guardians are the ones that are keeping them from completing that task. That guardian is only in the hero's mind. So you could create games with guardians that don't really exist except in the hero's mind. Alright, one of my favorite archetypes, the trickster. Why? Just because it's the way I am. Kind of a character that doesn't have a foot in either battle as the shadow or the hero. Kind of a neutral character, someone that's kind of in the middle. They enjoy making mischief. They enjoy maybe impeding the progress of the hero, maybe bringing them down the wrong path or something like that. A lot of times tricksters will help add some comic relief to the game or to the story. So think of a trickster as a extra way to distract the hero, have a little fun in the game, and impede some of the progress, but not completely. All right, the herald. The herald is a archetype that helps change direction of the story. They use in the book, they talk about Princess Leia and how she motivated Luke Skywalker. Luke was just on his regular life's path, and then all of a sudden Princess Leia came along and brought him over to fighting for them against the dark side. So here Princess Leia was a herald in helping change the direction of the hero into getting them engaged in a more exciting storyline than maybe what the hero's life was going with the other way. All right, then we have a protagonist. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider's protagonist, drives the story forward. Is a main character in the storyline, typically around a single-player game. the story is told from this character's point of view. So this is the one that is maybe working through the story and you're just coming along with them. They're very action oriented, not reactive, making things happen and not waiting for them to happen, going for the gold, let's say, and not waiting for it to come to them. One thing about a protagonist is that a protagonist may not always be a good guy. Protagonists sometimes could be not so good, but will always have be strong physically and morally. This could be a physical or mental flaws to the protagonist. That's what makes them maybe not a full good guy, because of some flaws they may have. Maybe they're a thief, but they have good morals when it comes to people, or something like that. Alright, so our archetype is a antagonist. An antagonist, opposite to a protagonist. Just talked a little bit about the protagonist. Now we're looking at the opposite. And since the protagonist is maybe not always a good guy, the antagonist is maybe not always a bad guy. The thing is that they have opposing views to the protagonist. When the antagonist and the protagonist want the same thing, when they're working to get the same goal, that's when they become linked. That link between the protagonist and the antagonist is known as a unity of opposites, because being that they're opposite each other, that unity of opposites makes their competition more relevant in your storyline. Okay, so there are a lot of different types of antagonists, but just remember that they're the opposite of the protagonist, typically looking for the same thing as the protagonist, which gives them that link together, but a lot of times they're maybe going at it the opposite way. Like I said, there are many different types of antagonists. Here are the four that they have listed in the book: transformational, mistaken, exaggerated, and realistic. Transformational, an anti-hero character, could be seen as a protagonist at one time, could have been a protagonist at one time, but then switched over to an antagonist. Typically the transformational character, who maybe did a transformation from being a protagonist to an antagonist, they typically will get their due at the end of the game. And what that does is players are looking for the bad people, the bad guys, to get their due, or have justice upon them, or which is what this satisfies the audience in the right and justice, the right thing to happen. So the other one, mistaken, at first sight may seem like a villain, turns out to be an innocent. Popular in murder mysteries and dramas. So a mistaken is, they come across, in our example here, come across as maybe being the murderer or a henchman or something like that, but they end up being not involved in that at all. They're innocent of anything that you may perceive for that person. Aggregated, larger than life characters, bizarre or sometimes even comic villains. Books suggest Dr. Evil. That could be the type of character here. Exaggerated character. Realistic, opposite to exaggerated character. This one is the hardest to create, because they're mild-mannered, normal type of character. One thing that's weird about them is they could seem a little creepy. They're kind of a normal character, but they could come off as being creepy, like the killer next door that is a creepy guy that lives there. So this could be the realistic type of person. So these are a couple of the antagonists you can maybe develop for. All right, here we're talking about co-protagonists, where they join forces with the protagonist. Sometimes they were a antagonist that maybe converted over to a protagonist, most of the time you're going to see something like this in a massive multiplayer online game, or MMO. One character transitions to protagonist roles, typically joining forces to defeat a common enemy. So you'll get people that join together, or characters that join together because they're fighting against the same enemy. And the final archetype character that we're going to look at is the supporting characters. Supporting characters, typically a pivotal character, something that's very important to the storyline, helps to keep the protagonist from walking away, because the protagonist may not be the best of people with a good heart, but they may at some point say, this isn't for me, I'm leaving, I don't need this kind of stuff. And the supporting character may talk to them and keep them going in the right direction with our hero. Usually is helpful in jump-starting the story, maybe doing the bidding of the antagonist, but helps keep the story, gets that started. And they say here it could be a sidekick to your hero. So any supporting characters could be sidekicks to your hero to help them move along in the game. Maybe add some comic relief, things like that. Alright, now we're going to start looking at traditional story structure. Hollywood movies. They start off with Hollywood movies typically having three parts to them: a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the beginning, it places the audience in the action of the drama. The beginning of the movie, you're trying to draw them in to make sure that they stay around for the entire movie. Then that will transition into the middle, which will then focus on any of the obstacles that our lead characters have to overcome to make it to the end. And then the end of the story is when typically the problems have been solved. Unlike movies, games generally start the beginning with the character bonding and discovering how the game works. So the character, being your player, needs to try and figure out, how does this game work? Which buttons do I have to press to do what? Things like that. So you need to be able to start that at the beginning. Also, unlike the movies, the hero is solving a problem. Game players have various paths. In the movie, you just watch from beginning to end, linear. In a game, a lot of times you can have multiple different paths to get to the same end, and you want to help guide your player through those multiple paths. The ending is not like the movies either, in that it has, with the various paths, these endings should relate to the past and make sense of the player and the path that they took. So the endings aren't exactly the same, but you would still have the three types: the beginning, the middle, and the end in your game. So in gaming, there's typically a certain structure. So here, the monomyth was introduced by a guy named Joe Campbell. And what Joe Campbell thought of was that story patterns that the legends and myths share. So this is kind of how this hero's journey came about, is through what Joe Campbell developed. And these 12 steps into the hero's journey, which is another name for the monomyth. So out of the 12, there's the ordinary world, everyday home of the hero. So that's where they're going to start out. They're going to start their journey or their path through this. They're going to start out in their home world. And then there's a call for the hero to go on a quest, to go on an adventure. So he's going to leave his ordinary world and go into this other adventure. The hero doesn't accept the quest at first a lot of times. That's the third step. They're going to refuse, it's called refusal of the call. The hero doesn't always readily accept that call. Then, here comes the mentor. Remember, we talked about the mentor earlier. The hero meets and is talked to by his mentor about the quest. The mentor, like we said, is helping guide the hero. And so the hero will then go on the quest. The hero's first refusal, and then he's going to cross what they call the first threshold. which means that the hero is going to start the journey based on what they heard from their mentor. So the mentor is going to talk to them and say, hey, this is the path you really need to do, this is the right thing to do, whatever, and they're going to do the crossing of the first threshold. And then there's going to be test allies and enemies. Hero is tested with various challenges. Maybe he meets the enemy for the first time, or hooks up with an ally. Hero is solving problem. And this is where Act 2 will start. Remember we talked about the 3 acts just on the previous slide? So Act 2 is going to start in here. And then what they have is they have the approaching the innermost cave. This is more challenges, preparation to make a stand up to the test. So is the hero going to be able to stand up for the test? You're basically giving them practice in the game to complete their task. And then comes up with the ordeal. This is the next one in place. The ordeal is the largest challenge. The hero must beat the biggest villain in here. Okay, that would be step 8. And then the reward, seizing the sword. When you're getting the reward for your journey, for your efforts, they receive their reward. Then the hero originally started in their original world. Now they have to have the road back. So the road back takes them back to where they want to go. The hero can stay in the special world or return home. Most will go home, but here in this step on the road back, which is number 10, is actually most heroes will go back to their home, but it is also the start of Act 3. Act 3 being the ending of your 3-act game. And then Resurrection, the hero faces danger one more time, known as the climax. So maybe they defeated the villain, maybe they thought they defeated the villain. So here is that little subtle surprise at the end, resurrection of the villain and one more task to complete. Maybe the villain had a sidekick that didn't get killed or didn't get taken care of, and that's what resurrects here. And then return with the elixir, hero returns home, forever changed from the experience. You go through all these steps, you go through this journey, of course you're going to change, so you're going to be forever changed from the experience. Also returning to the beginning leaves the story open-ended for additional adventures. So here at the end of your 3rd act, it's time for the sequel. Where are they going to go from here? Are they going to be called out to another adventure in another world? So this is things that you can look at and do while you're developing your game. So now we're going to start talking about story elements. Elements of your story, things that need to be part of your story. First one's going to be premise, and we're talking backstory, synopsis, theme, settings, things like that, about that you need to look at when you're developing a good game. So premise is the summary of the game. What is the game about? You have to introduce that to the player so they understand what's expected of them in the game. Only a couple of sentences or paragraphs intended to intrigue the customer. Typically you'll see that on the back of the game, maybe at the beginning of the game to reiterate that, and focuses on what's unique in the game. Next up is backstory. Backstory is what leads into where we start our game. Information that leads up to the starting point of the game, could be a short paragraph at the beginning of the game or in the manual, orients the player to the game. So a little bit of background is what you're trying to provide them with. And what does that do? That helps engage them in the game. If they really accept the backstory, then they're accepting the mission to go on for the hero's path. Then one of the other elements is the synopsis, also known as the storyline. The kind of like the path of the story that exists throughout the entire game. So it helps you identify where your game is going. It's your storyline, your path. Also helps the player escape from reality because now they're going to be involved in that storyline. And then we come up on the theme, indicates what the story is truly about. Normally relates to the obstacles in the story, the villain, nature, what's in the hero's way, the hero themselves. They can be in their own way. Remember we talked about shadow, and that could be the dark side of the hero. This is what the theme is going to be about. Next story element is settings, representing the overall world. Basically, you're creating the world that you want your player to be immersed in. So here, how are we going to immerse the person in here? Look as an example of a caveman dinosaur game. Typically isn't a first-person shooter type game. One thing that your setting will also tie into is the genre of the game, the type of game that you want to develop. But creating the story, think about the world when you're creating your story. What's the world going to have in it? What kind of amenities or distractions or things like that is my world going to have to keep my player interested in the game? Alright, next thing we're going to look at is the plot. The plot of the story, balancing conflict. This is typically how the story unfolds. How is it progressing along? How is it being presented to the player? The plot helps guide the story along. Balanced conflict is when the hero is on the brink of being destroyed and all of a sudden they escape. Must be maintained between the player in a multiplayer game, which is slightly different. Multiplayer games are slightly different than single player games. Shifting the focus, a way to bring the player back in focus on the storyline. Can be done by capturing the player's focus, adding new characters or new objects, kind of distracting them along the way to get them back into the game. Foreshadowing events, seen this in movies a lot, and alert as to what may be coming up in the future. Typically you'll foreshadow something that may be coming up as an alert. Players normally do not realize that this is happening. Next up is the suspension of disbelief. Suspension of disbelief, making the player forget about their real life. That's one of the things that you do inside of the game, is to try and draw them in and feel like they're part of that world. It makes the player think that they're actually in that world. Players now accept new rules in artificial life. What are the new rules? A person can fly without having any kind of device on them. There are dragons and they can fly. Those kind of things are in the suspension of disbelief. Next up in the plot is the realism. Contrast to suspension disbelief, it can relate to the real world situation. Here they're showing skateboarding. That's something that can be done in the real world, something that's done all the time. The world contains elements of the real world around it, but maybe you're just in a different world. So these are the different types of things you can do with your plot. So now we're going to get into game story devices. Interactivity, non-linear, game control, collaboration, things like that. So interactivity, there's more interactivity in games than most other entertainment. Movies, you watch, your most interactivity may be yelling at the screen or eating popcorn. Here you're actually required to do something in a game. Players take on the role of one of the storytellers in the game, or the characters. It helps with the flow of the game and keeps it going. Games are also not linear. Games can have multiple paths taking you down different ways. Like I said earlier, a movie is linear. You go from the beginning to the end, no interaction, typically don't rewind if you're at a theater, stuff like that. So here, non-linearly is something specific to a game where you can take them down a different path, maybe put them through a loop and they come back and they go, oh, how'd I get there? And they went down the wrong path, things like that. They do not follow a specific start and end date in games. Here, giving the player control. Give the player the ability to control the game in some way. One of the most popular ways is that the player can actually create their own customized type of avatar that they want to use. Maybe they can change the path based on the decision they make in the game. So you're giving the player the ability to go down different paths based on their actions or their decisions they make, and you're giving the player to customize their avatar to make them look more like what they want them to look like. Collaboration, this is where you can actually have more than one player share the role of a storyteller. They're called co-storytellers. Players become more involved in the collaborative game. They're more engaged in this type of game. A story tree is a useful tool that can help create a collaborative game. Here they're creating a tree and somebody puts something up. One author starts the story and others actually start adding on to it. So this is a tool in helping you develop a game. And then here's immersion, bringing the person into the game. Story, character, gameplay are powerful, engaging. So if your game has these elements, then you're getting the person to be immersed into the game, becoming part of the game. Social interaction plays a big role in immersion. MMOs, playing with other people, you can actually get them into the game and as part of a team or something like that. When players exit their character during the play, they break the immersive feel. So what they're talking about here is they're talking about if someone is in the game and they break character in the game, that kind of breaks the feeling of being in a different world, and that's something you typically don't want to do, is break your character. So player characters and avatars. Player characters are controlled by the player, of course. They're called player characters. When a person is controlling one character, it's called an avatar. Sometimes, though, players can actually control multiple characters. The big difference in this, besides being one versus many, is that if a person's controlling an avatar, they typically have more of a personal attachment to the avatar. That's me on the screen. I'm doing this. I'm raising my hand, whatever. They have less of an attachment if they're doing and controlling a group of different characters. Sometimes you're going to have a non-player character in your game. Maybe you're playing against that non-player character, or what's called an NPC. Typically these non-player characters or NPCs are controlled by the game itself. The computer is controlling their actions, maybe trying to react to your actions. So this is another type of character that you'll find in your game. So in games there are a lot of times various types of characters in the game. Animals, most often in family-based games, human characteristics based on a cartoon. So Mickey Mouse could be a animal type character in a game. Fantasy, lacking real life counterparts. Dragons, those could be considered animals, but they can also be considered a fantasy type of character in the game where there's no real life fire breathing, flying type of dragon out there. These characters were specifically created for the game, so you make them because you need them to fulfill a slot in your game that you want to have done. Historical, based on real life people. Abraham Lincoln would be a historical figure in a game that you may have trying to teach someone a little history, running through history kind of thing. A lot of times based on military or political people. Licensed, based on characters that have already been established in outer media meaning other media. I mentioned Mickey Mouse before. This would be a licensed type of character. The thing with these licensed characters is if you decide to use them, make sure you have an agreement with the person who owns the copyright to this licensed character. Sometimes it could cost you some big dollars to get that license agreement, but then again, sometimes it's going to cost you a lot more if you don't get that license agreement and they sue you. So, and then mythic counterparts to mythology, including Greek, Egyptian, and Norse mythology, Zeus and things like that could be these mythic type characters that you may want to put into a game. And here we come with the character triangle. Our example here is the love triangle. Through a relationship in the story, common in love stories and in movies, you see this all the time. It can be more than one triangle in a game. Doesn't have to be often just one. And a lot of times this is a subplot. Maybe the villain wants the girl, but that's only part of it. He wants the girl because he wants to take over the kingdom or something like that. But then the hero wants the girl or meets the girl, dislikes the girl, falls in love with the girl, and all of a sudden now you have this love triangle where the villain wants the girl, the hero wants the girl, and it's a subplot in the whole entire game. So this is one type of element for character development. Then we come to the character arc. One of the things that you can do is basically the progression of your character from start to finish. Here they're showing a character arc, the level starting off the smallest level being self, and then all of a sudden growing. There's the intrapersonal, then the interpersonal, then he's part of a team, that team is part of a community, and that community is part of the human race. So here is the arc for that, growing into the self acclamation is what it says there. It helps keep the storyline going. One of the things is protagonists rarely change in the game. They can grow in scope, but they typically will not have a character arc like this. Now we'll take a couple slides and look at POV, or point of view. First person, seen through the eyes of the character. You typically don't see your avatar on the screen. Here, this Borderlands, you're holding the gun. It's your vision that you're seeing through your eyes. This would be what they call the first person. Helps with player character bonding. If you think that's you, then it starts to become you. Third person player, this is another type of point of view. This one you actually are going to see your avatar on the screen. The avatar needs to be easily identified, so maybe you have a different color or a glow around the avatar that you're controlling. You're taking the role as a player, as an observer, but controlling your avatar in this manner. So this is a different point of view that you'll come across. So now we get into creating your characters. A lot of times you'll create your own characters from your own imaginations. There are tons, and we'll talk about this in class, tons of resources where you can get characters and avatars to put into your game. But a lot of times you'll want to develop once you progress along your own types of characters to better suit your game. There are different ways this happens. The techniques to do this, several techniques. Artist concept. The concept of the art creates several views of the character, typically a pencil drawing or computer generated 2D model, to kind of get a general idea. Most of the time when you're developing something, you're going to start simple, kind of get a general idea, and then move on to what would be called modeling. Starting to create the character in 3D. They have an X, Y, and Z axis to your character, so you can move them around and look at different angles of them. Must work in real time when needed, so you must be able to move them around. Then you're going to add some texture. What kind of skin? Do they have any fur, color, texture, feel, things like that. It kind of gives depth to that model that you're doing. And then finally, animation. How is it going to move? Try to trick the eye in believing that the model's moving fluidly. Needs to respond to player commands. I commanded to lift its right arm and turn its hand. That kind of thing. Open its mouth and roar. Those are all part of the animation part of it. And you have to be able to trick the person or the player into believing that that's actually happening and that the player is actually controlling that. Another thing is style for your character. Does your character fit into the world that you've developed for them. Style of character should follow and fit in with the world they exist in, maintains the game harmony. So here, these characters in the bubble may not look exactly like what they should look like, but the characters that are actually not in the bubble kind of fit in with the look and feel of the world or environment that they're in. Another character could be a character through narration. It could be just a voice coming over the speakers to talk about the game, or it could actually have a special character or text on the screen to help provide information, can provide backstory or guidance into the game as far as where to go or what they're doing or what the game's about. The other part is monologue. Monologue helps give one character to provide emotion and try and give a personal feel to the game with some personal characteristics. Lastly is dialogue. Dialogue can be two people interacting or discussing. It reveals information about the character and emotion, advances the plot, talking about what's happened or what's going to happen or what needs to happen, reveals any conflict, things like that. One of the most important things about dialogue is that you should not talk about the story so much. You're trying to give them hints as to where to go in the dialogue, but don't break or have it break character and talk about the story unless it's a narrator type character. Alright, next up is movement. Signature movement for the for your avatar. What do they have? A special move that they have? It showcases their personality. Movement identifies the character. How do they walk? Things like that. There are different things within movement. Idle is when the character is waiting for something to happen. How is he waiting there? Is he idling? Is he kind of swaying back and forth, waiting for something to happen? Helps identify your character in the game. And then probably one of the hardest things to do is the walking cycle. Reveals much about the character's personality. Do they walk fast, like Sonic would walk really fast? Do they walk really slow? Do they have a little limp or whatever? So walking cycle is very important. And one of the hardest things to do is to make it look fluid and smooth. Alright, now in the background, history and advancement. Before I do that, I'm going to tell you here what your homework is going to be. It's going to be on page 180, number 4. If you were to create a customized character based on yourself, what would it be like? Describe yourself in terms of your game character. What are your physical, personal characteristics, goals, strengths, weaknesses, likes, dislikes, general mood? Discuss other characters that might also appear in your game. Note these characters might not necessarily be helpful, but could represent obstacles that prevent you from reaching your goal. So that'll be the homework for chapter 5. So here, class and race. Class and race help establish characters' place in the game. Can sometimes be chosen by the character. You, as the controller of the game, can pick the person's class or race. And then from there, you look at what kind of skills does your character have. Helps advance the game with the skills that they have. Some characters will have different levels of skills. Very good at one thing, not so good at another thing. Maybe their counterpart or sidekick would have a skill that would help the hero, that the hero is kind of short on that particular skill. Most will have at least one special skill in that game. And character description. When you're creating your character, these are some of the things you need to have in your character description. What is my character going to have? A name, type, gender, age, physical appearance, background and history, a little brief information. It identifies the character as far as life and background, helps determine the character's depth. Depth being how involved is the character into the game. You wouldn't put a whole lot of time and effort into creating a character that's only going to be a minimal player in your game. Think of characters as real people to create real descriptions. How do you react to different situations in the game? How is the character going to react to different things that happen in the game? So in summary, look at all these different things. It's a long chapter, but it has a lot of great information in it. Like I said, I told you earlier about the homework. You can find that in the video. And if you have any questions, let me know or see me in class. Take care.